Hello and welcome back to the St. Joseph Reflection videos. It's so crazy that we keep on going deeper and deeper into this year. It seems like every video I learn something new about St. Joseph. If this is your first time joining, welcome. I hope that you learned something new. And all of our previous month's videos are available on all of our social media platforms. They're on our website, on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and I highly encourage you to check them out. As well, if you haven't read the Apostolic letter yet by Pope Francis about St. Joseph for this year of St. Joseph, it is an incredibly beautiful read, very quick, very easy, really insightful, and it's helped with my prayer life in these last few months of this year. For this video, I am so blessed to be joined by Deacon Mark. It is such a pleasure for you to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate your asking me.
Of course. And how I start every video, it's my favorite question to ask. Who is St. Joseph to you?
St. Joseph, well, I went to a St. Joseph's Catholic church when I was very young. Now, I wasn't extremely faithful when I was young, not that I was a bad kid, but that was the name of our church, so that's where I had my first communion, and that was where I had my confirmation. And so I always was aware of St. Joseph, and I always was aware of his being kind of quiet and being supportive of Mary and of Joseph, of Jesus, of course, but I didn't think about it a whole lot. I was just aware of his being a saint and a little bit about his life. And so that's how my faith life kind of started in him. But I have to be honest with you and say that this year is really the first time I've really considered St. Joseph in a serious way and how I can rely on St. Joseph in various ways. So I appreciate that you guys have been working on this.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's totally normal that during this year of St. Joseph, more and more people are growing in a devotion and a relationship with him, which I think is incredible because he can teach us so much, not just about our faith and how to love Mary and how to love Jesus, but just how to live our life as a faithful Christian, being devoted to God and listening to him where he guides us and where he wants us to go. And if that's anything that I've learned in these past, it's 8 months, it's incredible that that has helped with my prayer life and relationship with God in general. And I think that is also important to note that Joseph, while he might have not talked much in the Bible, it's not that he didn't talk and that he's not important. And we can see this in these different miracles that are attributed to him. And that's kind of what the theme is for this video and what we are going to discuss a little bit more, because I think it's incredible, these things that are attributed to him that people might not know about. And I think the first one that is incredibly amazing is the miracle that happened at that church in Santa Fe, that little chapel there.
Yes.
Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yes. So I was aware of this miraculous staircase, but I actually didn't know until this year that it was attributed to St. Joseph. So there was a group of nuns that wanted to start a community, like a school in Santa Fe. And so they're known as the nuns of Loretto. And so they had a Lady of the Light church. And so they wanted to have built, and they did have built a chapel. Well, they had the nave and they had the choir loft, but there was not a stairway that connected the nave to the loft. And so they went to some builders because the original builder had died, and they asked for a staircase, and the builder said it's impossible. We don't have room for a traditional staircase. And so the nuns got together and prayed a novena to St. Joseph. So that's why it's attributed to St. Joseph. And some man showed up and offered to build the stairs that would connect the two. And he wanted on the condition that the doors were closed and that nobody would see him building this stairway. And so no one ever saw, over 3 months' time, no one ever saw anyone leave or enter this chapel at Loretto. And he just left. So I guess at some point in time they're like, we need to see inside. And he was gone and the staircase was there. And so there were 2 rotations that went up, and there was no glue and there were no nails. And the wood was a spruce that was not of that area. And they don't know still where the wood came from. And he had very simple tools to work with. but miraculously the staircase was able to sustain itself without any, like I said, nails, no glue, and no central support.
Yeah, and I guess I love this like miracle or whatever you want to call it. I think it's just a beautiful masterpiece of craftsmanship.
Yes.
I had the pleasure of going and seeing it in person.
Oh, I would love to see that.
A couple years ago for the Hot Air Balloon Festival that happens
In August, I think.
in October in New Mexico, and then we went before we left to come back. We went to church at the chapel. I think it's a basilica or cathedral that's right next to the chapel,
Good.
and so you walk outside of the church and you walk down a little sidewalk. And there's directions to go to the chapel, and outside the chapel there's this tree, and hanging from the tree are all of these rosaries, and they're all beautiful in the sunlight and in the wind. And then you walk into the chapel, and the first thing that you see isn't actually the staircase because you walk in from the side. And then when you turn to your left, that's where the staircase is. And yes, the windows with all of the light coming in, it's beautiful, and being able to see it in person is incredible. And that's where you realize that there's no way that someone could have made this if it wasn't by some heavenly design or craftsmanship of a miracle. It's not something that you or me could make. I mean, granted, I know I couldn't make it because I do not have those skills. I cannot do anything with wood. Excuse me, I can't do anything with wood. So that just amazed me, and just going there and praying in that chapel and asking for his intercession and the intercession of Jesus and Mary as well, the whole Holy Family, and just realizing how these sisters were so thankful for this and so grateful, and they wanted to pay him, but he had left, and they wanted to thank him, but he had left, and they're still finding ways that this is a miracle, and there's no way that this should have happened or still be standing, and that's just wild to me that there's something like that is still present in our world, and we're able to actually go and see and visibly thank God for these miracles that remind us that he is always working in our lives, whether it's in little ways or big ways, and helping us, build our staircase to heaven so that we can also be close to him in the way that Joseph is now. And I guess think that the way that those sisters, this man just showed up. They didn't know who he was or what he was about, and he gets asked to be left in the chapel by himself and to work on it alone. And then this miracle happened. And there's another miracle attributed to St. Joseph in France, one that I actually had not heard of before, but it also relates to somewhat of a vision or an apparition with St. Joseph, which is not very common. It's mainly apparitions of Mary that you hear about, but this one in France is really crazy, if you want to share that story as well.
So I was totally unaware of this. So there's this called the Spring of St. Joseph, and it's in a little town called like Cantignac, France. And so the story is there was a shepherd, and his name was his last name was Ricard, and his first name was it reminded me of Gaspard, like gasping for breath, but he was very thirsty. And so he's in the field, he's a shepherd, and his container, like canteen, was empty, and he was like he was in agony because he was so thirsty. And so he was in the grass, just lying in the grass, and an old man shows up, and he says, "I am Joseph." And Joseph says, "Lift it and you can drink." And so when Joseph said this, he's pointing to a boulder. So Gaspard is looking at this boulder, and he's like, "There's no way I can lift this boulder." And so Joseph said, "Just pick it up and you'll be able to drink." And so the story goes that Gaspard was able to easily lift up this boulder that he thought there was no way he could lift, and moved it aside, and there was a spring. And so he was able to drink. And so he went to look up to thank him, like in Santa Fe, and he was gone. So he told everybody, like the woman at the well, he goes and tells everybody what happens. And so it starts like this pilgrimage that started at the Spring of St. Joseph, which isn't apparently too far from an apparition that had happened with the Blessed Virgin Mary, I think in the 1500s was this apparition of the Virgin Mary, and this one was in 1660. when this spring was found. And so it started, people going for healings and miracles. And so it's a miraculous thing as well.
And I'm pretty sure there's still miracles that are happening from that site as well.
I would think so, because it's part of a tour now with all the apparitions.
Yeah, and I'm just so surprised that it's not something that is publicized.
Well, I guess because St. Joseph was quiet, so they're keeping it quiet.
Yeah, because, it's in France, and there's also Lourdes, where there's the spring with St. Bernadette, and that's what it reminded me of when I was doing my research and reading more about this, and super surprised that it wasn't something that people who go to Lourdes would also go to that, or even something that people would know about. But like you said, it's kept quiet because of the humility of St. Joseph.
Yeah.
And he teaches us to be humble, but also to be grateful and go back to God for the praise that is due for him, and the thanksgiving, and like the sisters and that man, they wanted to thank Joseph, who helped them get what they needed in that time, whether it was a staircase or literally water, so that he could survive, because they didn't know what they were going to do otherwise. And Joseph just shows up when we least expect it. And I think it's funny, I have a couple of friends back from college who sometimes during a year they say that there's a saint that's following them, and whether it's through people just telling them about it, or through different novenas that come up, or just going to a church and having it be dedicated to that saint or whatever. One of my best friends, her saint that follows her around, or has been following her around recently, is St. Joseph. And it's crazy that now this has been a year dedicated to St. Joseph, and just the things that she's learned about him and that I've learned about him, but then growing in that humility and growing in that trust is wild. And just, I think that we need to allow ourselves to be open to having that saint, whether it's St. Joseph or Mary, the Mother of God, or our confirmation saint, baptismal saint, whoever that is, being open to them, being present in our lives and guiding us closer to God and to heaven, so that we can continue to strive for, sainthood and holiness, and being who God called us to be. And I think that that's really evident in St. Andre Bessette's life. Like, he was told he's not going to be anything. He barely could pass school. He was not intelligent in education through learning things, but he was very intelligent in the words and the followings and the movements of God and the Holy Spirit in his life. And last couple months for me, he's been the saint that's been following me around.
Oh my.
Which started through stuff with his feast day when I was doing Saint of the Week or Saint of the Day through our Instagram. And he, I guess, has continually been following me. And when it was declared the year of St. Joseph, then he's been following me more. And so I think he is an incredible person to talk about through the miracles and the intercession of St. Joseph in Canada, with all the work that he did there. And he was just a doorman. He was like no one. And then all of these incredible, great things happened in his life. Would you mind sharing his story?
Yes. So, of course, I didn't know anything about St. Andre Bessette, but he was in Montreal, and he was with this congregation of Holy Cross, and he was like kind of a doorkeeper, and he swept the sidewalks of this school. And he was not highly educated, so he wasn't a teacher, so he supported the efforts and the activities of the teachers and of the students. And so he had this very strong devotion to St. Joseph. And as he worked around the school, he noticed an adjacent field. And so he asked those who were in charge of the school if he could build a chapel to St. Joseph. And they allowed him to, but it only allowed for a handful of people. And he's like, no, that we need to have so much more for St. Joseph. So they let him raise money for a church. And he ended up building what was then the largest Catholic church in North America. And it's in Montreal, and I don't know much about Montreal really, but there's this big green copper dome that's like a landmark of Montreal, and this is what he had built. and it was in 1924 when it was completed. And so he raised the money. He's just like you said, just a humble, simple man, and he raised this money to build this huge church. And he became known as the one who helped raise money for it, and so people wanted to see him, and people knew of his devotion to Saint Joseph, and they would come to him, the teachers, the students, and then people like on visits or pilgrimages, and would ask him to help have the intercession of Saint Joseph, and many miracles happened as a result. And from what I understand, there's all these crutches that lay there from healings that had occurred as a result of people going and talking to Saint Andre and having the intercession of Saint Joseph. And so it was really an incredible story.
Yeah, I mean, he had so many people coming to him for intercessions and asking for him to pray for healings and miraculous things in the lives of these people, that he had to have his superior give him office hours so that these people could come and see him, because there were so many people that wanted to see him. And when he died, he had so many people show up for his
over
funeral.
1 million people went to visit.
Because they knew that he was a holy man, and they were inspired by the way that he lived his life. And I think that he would say that he attributes that to his devotion to St. Joseph and striving to live as St. Joseph did in his daily life, even in the small tasks, the behind the scene things that he was doing. And I think he did that incredibly well, and he inspires me to live that way. And I hope that he can inspire us throughout the rest of this year. There's only a few months left in the year of St. Joseph, but that doesn't mean that we can't have that carry over into all the years to come in our lives. Thank you so much for coming and joining and speaking with me about St. Joseph and sharing these incredible, miraculous events in our time, in current time, of how St. Joseph still has a working hand in our life and helps us to strive for the holiness and the sainthood that God has planned for us. And just like in your image that you brought with you of St. Joseph and Jesus working side by side, Joseph wants us to work side by side with him as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for asking me.
Of course. And like always, these videos are available on all of our social media platforms. They are on Instagram, they are on Facebook, our website, and on YouTube. So if you missed it or you came partway through our live stream, you can go back and watch the whole thing over and over again multiple times in case you missed something or want to write something down. And please join us for our next video. The next one is with Father Garrett, and we are going to be speaking about some incredible things, so you're not going to want to miss it. God bless.